Lena never imagined that the last journey of her life would lead her to a meeting that would change everything. While fleeing from a relentless criminal network, she found herself in a city where everything was unknown, yet nothing seemed to be what it appeared. At the same moment, Raphael, a man marked by a dark past and a guilt that consumed him, was undergoing a twist in his own life. Their destinies would cross in an unexpected event, but also in a moment of profound despair, testing their strength, beliefs, and hopes. Between one's secrets and the other's scars, neither of them could predict what the future had in store for them. Now, get ready for this emotional story. But before we begin, take a moment to check if you're subscribed to the channel, because in the upcoming videos, we'll have even more stories that will touch your heart. Lena didn't know if she was safe. Every movement felt like it was being watched. Every street, every corner, turned into a maze full of invisible dangers. Fleeing from a relentless criminal organization that was hunting her down, she knew she couldn't stay in one place for long. But at that moment, exhaustion had overtaken her. With no resources, no clear options, she simply followed her instinct and found herself in a small town where no one knew her, where she could, for a brief moment, breathe. However, even here, she hadn't found peace, and something in the air seemed to promise that this town would also be just another trap. She walked through the narrow, winding streets, searching for a discreet place where she could hide for a few hours, away from the eyes of passers-by. The sound of her boots hitting the pavement seemed louder than it should, but she didn't dare run. Finally, she entered a cafe, a small and cozy place, with a few tables, simple decor, and an atmosphere that exuded tranquility, contrasting with the storm that raged in her mind. Lena sat at a corner table far from any windows and took a deep breath, trying to collect herself. However, no matter how much she tried to disguise herself, an unsettling feeling washed over her. Something wasn't right. Her eyes, alert, scanned the surroundings, always vigilant, always calculating the possibilities of danger. And then, she saw them. He was at the table nearby, sitting with his head down, as if immersed in something that kept him detached from the world. But Lena's eyes couldn't help but be curious. He seemed different. His posture, the energy he emitted, something about him triggered a strange premonition. And in an instant, he lifted his eyes, and theirs met. A shock, a moment suspended in time. The warmth of the coffee seemed to dissipate, and she was overwhelmed by a strange sensation, as if the universe had paused right there, in that second, to watch. Raphael, as if pulled by an invisible force, held her gaze for a moment. It was as if something inside him had been activated, a feeling he couldn't ignore. He didn't believe in coincidence, but there was something in Lena that stirred him in a way that was hard to describe. She didn't seem normal. Not because she was doing something wrong, but because she seemed like a lost soul. Someone carrying a burden he couldn't comprehend. But there was something more. Something in him also seemed the same. He knew that the pain she carried wasn't just any tragedy. That woman was running from something, and that something, he sensed, had marked her in an irreparable way. But Raphael didn't know what to do with that feeling. After their initial glance, he returned to his reading, trying to convince himself that it was just a coincidence. But the thought that she wasn't who she seemed began to dominate him. He, who had always isolated himself to avoid getting involved, now felt a counterforce, a powerful curiosity he couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Lena forced herself to ignore the feeling that she was being watched. She breathed deeply and tried to focus on her own survival. She couldn't afford distractions. She was there because there was nowhere else to go. She would need to find a way to disappear, to vanish from everyone's sight, to start over. But she knew it wouldn't last long. She wouldn't be able to keep running forever. And then she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. A brief noise, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. She glanced quickly toward the door and saw a man enter, his gaze fixed without disguise. He seemed confident yet determined, and his presence was almost palpable. The first sensation of danger invaded her. Lena stood up quickly, trying to remain calm. Her reflexes adjusted automatically to the situation. She needed to act before it was too late. She knew that if she were recognized there, any chance of escaping would vanish. But before she could decide what to do, the familiar sound of nearby footsteps was interrupted. Raphael was standing up. Without knowing why, he approached Lena, as if being guided by an invisible force. Something in his eyes reflected the same unease. When he stopped at her table, the silence stretched for a moment, creating an atmosphere laden with tension. Lena, still unsure whether she could trust the stranger in front of her, looked at him cautiously. But Raphael, instead of asking what she was doing there or launching any accusations, simply made a subtle gesture with his head. "You seem lost," he said, his voice deep but not hostile. It wasn't an accusation, but a statement. Something in the way he spoke, with empathy, made her feel a strange connection. She didn't know if she should trust him, but something inside her told her he wasn't a threat. She hesitated for a moment. The inner struggle was evident on her face, but something in the simplicity of the question touched her. There was no rush. He wasn't forcing her into anything. She could refuse, continue alone, but there was something there that kept her from running away. Something in Raphael that, inexplicably, seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start. But at the same time, the awareness of the imminent danger made her fight against any impulse to get closer. She finally responded, more to herself than to him. "I'm not lost. I just need a little peace." It was a lie, but she felt that Raphael wouldn't call her out on it. He simply observed her, his expression enigmatic, and didn't pressure her. But as he turned to leave, there was a sense that something was about to happen, something that would involve them, even if they didn't want it. Deep down, Lena knew there was something more in that town than simple coincidence. She just didn't yet know how deep that bond would be or where it would lead them. The story is getting more and more exciting, isn't it? Let us know in the comments what you think so far. And don't worry, don't go anywhere, there's still so much more to come. The following days passed slowly and calculated, as if the universe had entered a waiting rhythm, awaiting the right moment to reveal the cards of destiny. Lena, despite the anxiety, knew she couldn't stay in that city for much longer. The danger was still out there, hovering over her like an unrelenting shadow. But the feeling that something bigger was about to happen kept her from moving forward. She didn't know whether she should trust Raphael, but she couldn't ignore the inexplicable connection she felt to him. Something inside her told her he knew more than he was revealing, that he had a dark past from which he too was running. One particularly quiet night, Lena felt the urge to leave her room and take a walk. The cafe where she had met Raphael seemed to be the only place where she felt a slight sense of normalcy, as if there were something familiar there. A small refuge where her worries were momentarily muffled. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but the desire to understand more about the man who had crossed her path was uncontrollable. Upon entering the cafe, the few customers present didn't notice her, but Raphael was there again, alone, with a distant and worried look. When she saw him, she hesitated for a moment, but then, driven by a curiosity she couldn't explain, decided to approach him. The atmosphere was calm, but there was a tension in the air, as if something was about to happen. Lena once again felt that this moment was no coincidence. Something inside her knew that there, at that table, they would begin to understand something that would change the course of their lives. Raphael looked at her as soon as she entered, but said nothing. His expression was closed, but not hostile. It was as if he had been waiting for something, as if fate had somehow pushed him toward this encounter. When Lena approached his table, he made a subtle gesture for her to sit. Without words, she sat down. The silence between them was dense, filled with unsaid meanings. But finally, it was he who broke the silence. "You've noticed, haven't you?" he began, his voice deep but soft. "We are connected by something we can't control. Our pasts are intertwined in some way." Lena furrowed her brow, surprised. How could he know? Who was he, really? Curiosity and fear took hold of her at the same time, but instead of retreating, she felt compelled to listen more. Something in the way he spoke made her believe that he wasn't trying to deceive her, but that there was a truth hidden there, a truth she needed to uncover. Raphael continued, looking her in the eyes as if weighing his words. "I also have something to hide. Something that, if you knew, could change everything between us." Lena felt a chill run down her spine. What did he mean? There was a tension in the air, something heavy and secret hanging between them, but she didn't know what to do with it. She decided then to be direct. You've realized that we're getting involved in something we don't fully understand, haven't you? What are you hiding? Raphael sighed, his expression even more grave. He seemed to be struggling with his own emotions, as if every word was a heavy burden. I came to this city running too, he finally revealed, his voice softer, as if the confession was too difficult. I was someone else. I made mistakes, and some of them still haunt me. What you may not know about me is that, before I came here, I lived a life I never want to relive. Lena watched him closely. The man in front of her seemed to carry a heavy burden. She could hear the pain in his voice, but didn't know what to do with it. He was opening up to her in a way she hadn't expected. In a place where she was trying to hide from her own past, he seemed to be offering her a window into his. I worked for the same organization that's chasing you, he said, and his words cut through the silence like a sharp blade. I was part of all that. I was one of them, Lena. Part of that dirty world. And it wasn't until I realized what was happening that I could escape. Raphael's words hit Lena like a bomb. She froze, her heart beating faster. She looked at him, trying to understand what he was saying. Confusion dominated her, but at the same time, she felt a strange sense of relief. He was no longer a complete stranger. He understood, in a visceral way, the weight of running, the weight of an irreversible past. But at the same time, it made her question, had he really escaped all of that? Or was he still trapped in his old life? Raphael continued, his words filled with guilt and regret. I wasn't a good man. I did things I deeply regret. But Lena, if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that we can't escape who we are, but we can change who we're going to be from now on. I left that world behind, and now all I want is to try to fix the mistakes of my past. Lena felt a whirlwind of emotions. She didn't know if she could fully trust Raphael. He had been part of the criminal organization that hunted her, and that couldn't be ignored. But at the same time, he was opening up to her in a way no other man had before. There was something genuine in his sincerity, something she couldn't deny. And once again, she found herself facing a choice. Stay alone, running, or give a chance to this man who, like her, carried deep scars but seemed willing to fight to change. Raphael's words hung in the air like a storm about to form, and Lena felt as though she were being swallowed by the magnitude of what he had revealed. She didn't know what to do with the truth he had just shared. How could she trust someone who, until that moment, had seemed like a complete stranger? But at the same time, something inside her couldn't fully push him away. He was in search of redemption, just like her. And somewhere deep within her heart, she wondered if that was enough to believe in him. The cafe, once cozy, now felt like a cramped, almost suffocating place. The smell of coffee mixed with the tension in the air made her feel out of place, as though every breath she took carried an unbearable weight. She wanted to leave, to run away, but there was something that kept her there, at that table. The choice was before her, and there was no turning back. Raphael looked at her with eyes that seemed to search for answers she didn't know if she was ready to give. He was waiting for a reaction, but he couldn't predict what it would be. Lena felt the words burning in her throat, but she didn't speak immediately. She knew that if she said anything, she might not be able to take it back. But at the same time, she knew that what was at stake wasn't just the present, but the entire future of her life. The doubt was eating away at her from the inside. If she believed in Raphael, she would have to let go of part of her own protection. The life she had built to escape the past, the walls she had built around herself to ensure her safety. Would she be willing to risk that? I don't know, Raphael. I can't just forget everything you've said, she murmured, her voice trembling. You were one of them. How can I know that you've really changed? That you're not lying to me now, just to use me or put me in danger again? Raphael seemed to understand the anguish in her words. He lowered his gaze as if aware that this doubt was legitimate, that he couldn't expect her to accept him without question. But he wouldn't give up so easily. I understand, Lena. I know it's hard to believe. I don't deserve your trust, not after what I've done. But all I can do is prove it with my actions, show you that I am capable of fighting against who I was to become someone different, to be someone worthy of your trust. There was a sincerity in his voice that seemed to cut through the words and reach Lena's heart. He wasn't trying to convince her with empty promises, but with the pain of a man who knew that, in order to be accepted, he would have to face not only his enemies, but also his own inner demons. That struggle he was fighting, she could see it in his eyes, and something deep inside her began to wonder if he was telling the truth. But Lena knew that trust wasn't given so easily. That game of words, that game of choices, had a price. She couldn't ignore what was at stake. The life she had been living, always running, always hiding, was now in danger. By deciding to take a step toward Raphael, she would expose herself to more dangers, more uncertainties. And even more, she didn't want to be a victim again, someone who at some point could fail her. She had promised herself many times that she would never trust anyone fully again, that she wouldn't let anyone get that close to her again. "I can't make this decision right now," Lena finally said, her voice firmer than she felt inside. "I need time. I can't just believe your words and expect everything to change overnight. I have my own path, Raphael, and as much as I want to believe that you're being sincere, I don't know if I can trust you completely." Raphael looked at her with an intensity that almost made her recoil, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded, as if he knew that was the most she could offer at that moment. "I understand, Lena. You have the right to think, to take your time. But know one thing, I'll be here, waiting. I won't run away from you. I won't pressure you, but I'll fight to show you that I can be the person you need." The conversation, which had once seemed full of uncertainties, was now surrounded by a silent promise, a pact between them. Lena didn't know what the future held, nor if she would be able to accept Raphael in her life. But something had changed inside her. She knew that, no matter how much she tried to pull away, the connection between them couldn't be ignored. Something there was different, something she couldn't deny. When Lena stood up to leave, a feeling of inevitability surrounded her. Whatever happened in the coming days, she knew that both her choice and Raphael's wouldn't be easy. But deep down, she felt that she had taken the first important step, perhaps the hardest of all. She had admitted to herself that, in some way, her fate was tied to his. And like a game of chess, the move was now in her hands. The doubt was deep, but the journey ahead seemed more complex than she could ever imagine. Lena took a deep breath as she left the cafe. The night was darker than usual, and a sense of tension surrounded her. She felt that at any moment, something could change again. But until then, she would need to figure out who she could trust, what she really wanted, and what she was willing to lose. The choice was now hers. As days passed, Lena tried to get back to her normal routine, but something within her had already changed. The weight of Raphael's words echoed in her mind, like a persistent echo that couldn't be erased. She couldn't shake the feeling that, at any moment, her past could resurface, disrupting the fragile balance she was trying to rebuild. What he had said about both of their pasts, the choices they had made, was steeped in mystery and attempts to escape. But Lena's greatest fear was that, by getting closer to Raphael, she might lose control over the life she had worked so hard to build. With every step she took, Lena felt herself getting more wrapped up in the labyrinth of emotions she had started to weave around herself. Her work, her friendships, her routine, everything seemed in perfect order. But the memories she had tried to bury, the pieces of a life marked by mistakes and painful choices, kept infiltrating her thoughts. Those moments of vulnerability she wasn't yet ready to face. She knew that if she wasn't careful, she could be swallowed by the past she feared so much. That afternoon, while reviewing some notes in her office, her phone vibrated. Raphael's name appeared on the screen, and Lena hesitated for a moment. He hadn't been insistent after their conversation at the cafe, which surprised her. She had imagined he would demand an answer, that he would try to pressure her into making a decision, but he seemed to understand that it wouldn't be that way. His temperament seemed as intense as hers, but he was giving her space. Something about him was different, but Lena couldn't understand what exactly. She took a deep breath and, without quite knowing why, she answered. "Hi, Raphael. Hi, Lena. How are you?" His voice was calm, but there was something in it that suggested he was waiting for something, perhaps an opening. Perhaps a reaction. I'm fine. Just, trying to get things in order around here. And you? She tried to keep the conversation light, but she knew that somewhere between the words, the tension she couldn't hide was palpable. There was something in Raphael that destabilized her, but she couldn't explain it. I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about, and even though you're not ready to answer, I want you to know that I'm here for you, for whatever you need. Just to support you, no rush. I understand that your past isn't easy to face, but if you ever want to talk about it, I'm willing. His offer seemed sincere, but Lena felt a wave of resistance flood her chest. He was trying to get closer to her, trying to be someone she could trust, but that made her even more cautious. She didn't want to be vulnerable again. Her past had been marked by mistakes she couldn't fix anymore. She didn't want anyone, not even Raphael, getting involved with the shadows of her history, with the choices that haunted her. No, Raphael, it's not about what you're offering. It's about me. What I carry with me, what I can't leave behind. I'm scared. Scared that if you knew who I really am, what I did, you'd see me differently. I don't want that. I don't want you to look at me with distrust. There was a vulnerability in Lena's voice that she couldn't hide, and Raphael seemed to understand perfectly. He sighed before speaking, and his response was full of empathy. Lena, no one is perfect. What you did or didn't do in the past doesn't define who you are now. I'm here to get to know you, not what happened before. If you let me, I want to be by your side as you heal, as you face the things you fear. Those words, simple yet full of deep meaning, touched Lena in a way she hadn't expected. She felt a mix of gratitude and resistance. How could he be so patient, so willing to accept what she couldn't even accept in herself? This wasn't the behavior of a man who just wanted something from her. Raphael was offering more than temporary support. He seemed to want to be part of her healing process, which was both comforting and terrifying. Lena looked out the window of her office, her mind racing in opposite directions. On one hand, she wanted to believe that Raphael could be a positive influence, that he was genuinely there to help her. But on the other hand, the fear of giving in, of risking her emotional security, was overwhelming. What was going on in her heart was an internal battle, where the desire to heal and move forward collided with the fear of reliving a past she wanted to bury forever. She felt that life was forcing her to make a choice between who she wanted to be and who she feared becoming. And deep down, she knew she couldn't keep running forever. She needed to face the things that held her back. But maybe, with Raphael's support, she could finally find the courage to do so. The decision was in her hands, but the weight of each move seemed heavier than ever. I'll think about all this, Raphael. I need more time, but thank you for being here, for being patient. I just don't know how far I can go with all this. I'll be waiting, Lena, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. Those words were like a silent promise, and Lena felt that, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in her struggle. But she knew that the future, the real future, would be much more complicated than anything she had imagined. And as the past continued to haunt her, she would have to decide whether she was ready to face it, or if she preferred to lose herself in what was yet to come. Time passed, and despite her efforts to move on, Lena couldn't help but feel divided. Every time she looked at Raphael, she found herself focused on his small gestures, the way he seemed to know her better than she knew herself. He was becoming a constant presence in her life, but at the same time, she couldn't shake the fear of opening up completely. What was hidden behind that calm exterior of his? What did he truly want from her? More than that, Lena wondered, how should she act in the face of the feelings that were beginning to emerge, feelings she was desperately trying to repress? One evening, after another exhausting day at work, Lena received a message from Raphael. She hesitated before opening the screen of her phone, as if afraid of what she might find. The message was simple, yet direct. I'd like to see you. Can we talk? No rush? Something about him, always patient and observant, touched her in a way she didn't know how to react to. But there was something more in that message, something that seemed to indicate that he knew she hadn't been completely honest with him. It was as if he knew there was a weight on her shoulders, something she still hadn't been able to put into words. She took a deep breath and, despite her inner resistance, responded affirmatively. "Okay, let's meet. But only if you promise not to rush me, that we'll just talk." When they arrived at the agreed-upon place, a small cafe on the outskirts of town, the atmosphere was peaceful, almost empty. They sat at a secluded table, away from the hustle and bustle, which allowed a sense of privacy. The soft lighting reflected off Raphael's face, and Lena found herself staring into his eyes, as though trying to decipher something that had always been there, but that she didn't want to see. Raphael smiled, but there was a certain gravity in his expression. "I didn't come here to rush anything, Lena. I just want you to know that I'm willing to listen. I see that there's something in you that you're not sharing with me. Something that's keeping you from moving forward, from giving yourself to what could be good between us." Lena turned her gaze away, a whirlwind of thoughts forming in her mind. She knew she couldn't hide the truth forever about what had been keeping her from moving forward. But what would his reaction be when he discovered the secret she carried? What would he think of someone like her? Someone marked by scars from choices that couldn't be erased? The weight of guilt and regret was immense, and she didn't know how to share it with someone who seemed so perfect. "It's not that simple, Raphael," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I'm not who you think I am. There are things in my past that are hard to share. Not because I'm ashamed of them, but because if I tell you everything, you might end up distancing yourself from me. And I don't know if I can handle that." Raphael watched her with an intense gaze, but without urgency. He knew she was torn, and the last thing he wanted was to force her to open up about something she wasn't ready to reveal. But at the same time, he felt that if there wasn't total honesty between them, they could never move forward. "Lena, I understand that your past is complicated. But what matters now, what truly matters, is who you are now. I'm not judging you, and I never will. I just want to be by your side, with no rush, no expectations. I just want you to show me who you really are." These words touched Lena deeply. It was hard for her to believe that someone could accept her fully, with all her flaws, mistakes, and vulnerabilities. For so long, she had believed that her past defined her. She felt like it was impossible for anyone to see beyond the mistakes that marked her. But Raphael was there, not judging her, just waiting for her, offering patience and understanding. "My past isn't pretty, Raphael. I was someone who made many mistakes. I betrayed people who trusted me. I lied to those who loved me most. I did things I deeply regret, things that I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget." Silence hung between them. The weight of Lena's words was immense, and she felt a lump in her throat, as if her confession was both liberating and terrifying. She feared that he would see her differently, as someone incapable of change, someone who had lost the chance to be happy. Raphael, however, did not look away. He remained silent for a moment, digesting her words, but instead of looking at her with disdain or judgment, he smiled gently. "Lena, we all have our mistakes. What matters is what we do with them, how we learn, and how we grow. Your past doesn't scare me, nor does it make me see you any differently. It makes me see someone who had the courage to look at their mistakes and is now trying to move forward. I admire that, and that's why I'm here." His words were like an electric shock to Lena. She felt a wave of relief mixed with a sense of vulnerability, as if she was surrendering to something she didn't know if she would be able to control. Raphael accepted her, with all her mistakes and flaws. He didn't see her as a broken person, but as someone who had the potential to be more, to evolve. And for a moment, Lena began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this chance to rise again. "What do you want, Raphael?" Lena asked, her voice soft but laden with emotion. "What do you really want from me?" Raphael looked into her eyes, and the answer he gave was simple, but profound. "I want to be by your side, Lena. I want to walk with you on this journey, if you'll allow me. It doesn't matter what happened before. It doesn't matter what you've done. I'm here to support you, to be a team." These words fell upon Lena like a balm. She didn't know if she was ready to take that step, but she felt that Raphael was there, willing to share her burden, willing to wait as long as it took for her to find her own peace. This was the first step toward a change she had never imagined possible: acceptance. And for the first time in a long time, Lena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future could be different. Lena was at a pivotal point in her life, a point where all of her past choices, wounds, and regrets were about to collide with the possibility of a future she had never imagined. Raphael was there, more present than ever, and although his company was comforting, Lena knew she still had much to face. The decision ahead of her wouldn't be easy. She would have to decide whether to throw herself wholeheartedly into this new chapter or whether fear and insecurity would dominate her once again. She didn't know exactly what would happen, but the only thing she could do was be honest with herself. The time she spent with Raphael had shown her something that had seemed so distant before: the power of acceptance, the strength of forgiveness, and, above all, the courage to start over. But Lena's past still haunted her. The memories of the mistakes she had made still crept into her thoughts, like shadows trying to obscure the light she now felt timidly glowing within her. It was a cold morning when she found herself alone, walking along a trail in the park she used to visit to think. The gentle wind brushed against her face, but it wasn't enough to alleviate the warmth that came from within her. She knew she had to make a decision, but doubt still consumed her. Could Raphael truly see the best in her? Could she let herself fall for him without the fear of failing again? Those questions echoed in her mind with an insistence that almost paralyzed her. Over the past few months, Raphael had shown her that, in his heart, he believed in her. He didn't see her as the woman who had made mistakes, but as someone who was willing to correct her flaws and try to be better. However, what he didn't know was that, for Lena, trust wasn't something she could offer easily. She carried the remnants of a past filled with errors and disappointments, a past that had taught her to protect herself before letting anyone in. But as she walked along the trail that day, with the wind whispering in her ears, Lena began to understand that the biggest obstacle between her and Raphael wasn't her past, but the emotional barrier she still built around herself. She stopped for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the cold breeze in her lungs. What Raphael truly wanted was something simple. He wanted to be with her, to accept her flaws, and to walk beside her. But for that to happen, Lena knew she would need to learn to trust again, not only in Raphael, but in herself. She needed to let go of the guilt and regrets and accept that, in order to change, she needed to take control of her own destiny. It was then that Lena realized the depth of the choice before her. She was no longer deciding between the past and the future. She was deciding whether she was ready to allow love and acceptance into her life fully. Raphael wasn't forcing her to change. He wasn't pressuring her to be someone she wasn't. He was loving her for who she was, with all her flaws and everything in between. And this, more than anything else, made her realize that she didn't have to be perfect to deserve love. Back in the city, she met Raphael at the square where they always used to meet. He was waiting for her with a gentle smile, but there was an air of anxiety. Lena knew he was waiting for her to open up, to make the decision to be truly honest about what she felt and what she wanted. As she approached him, he lifted his eyes, as if he knew the moment had come. Lena sat next to him, looking into his eyes with a sincerity she hadn't been able to offer before. "I've thought a lot about us, about what you've shown me, and about what I need to be happy," she said, her voice firm, but full of emotion. "I know I still have a lot to learn, but I want to try. I want to try to be better, not just for you, but for myself too." Raphael looked at her in silence, the tension in his shoulders dissipating as he heard those words. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that they would face challenges, but he was willing to face them by her side. "I will never ask you to be perfect, Lena. I just want you to be yourself, with all your mistakes, with all your qualities. And I will be here, supporting you every step of the way." Lena felt the weight of her own fears dissipate in that moment. She knew the road ahead would still have its ups and downs, that the ghosts of the past might resurface. But for the first time, she felt she was ready to face them, and not alone. She had Raphael by her side, and maybe that was the greatest gift she could give herself. The chance to allow herself to be loved, without reservations, without fears. What followed was a step at a time. They began to build a relationship based on trust and patience, where the mistakes of the past no longer had the power to define the future. Lena learned that, to move forward, it was necessary to accept both the moments of joy and the moments of pain. She wasn't a person without flaws, but a person capable of learning and growing from every challenge. And Raphael, by her side, became the anchor she never knew she needed. But the greatest lesson Lena learned was that true love doesn't require perfection. It only requires courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to surrender, and to trust the other. When she finally made the decision to open herself up to that love, she didn't just gain Raphael, she also gained herself. Realizing that there was no barrier or secret that could stop her heart from surrendering to what was good and true. Now, with the future ahead, Lena knew the journey wasn't over, but with Raphael by her side, she was ready to live every moment, knowing that together they could face any challenge. Because sometimes, love isn't about finding perfection, but about building something beautiful out of imperfections. And with him, she finally believed that, despite all the odds against her, their story could be the happy ending she never thought possible. Lena and Raphael's journey was just beginning to unfold, and despite all the obstacles they had overcome up until that moment, there was still something lingering in the air. The weight of choices. What would happen when the first challenges appeared? How would they react to the adversities that life would inevitably bring? As the days passed, Lena began to realize that the greatest test for both of them was not just in the big decisions, but in the small, everyday choices. Every word exchanged, every gesture of affection or neglect, every moment of silence or outpouring, all of this was building a foundation for their relationship. And it was in these little things that, deep down, true love would be tested. Lena's work was also beginning to demand more of her. She was growing, exploring new opportunities, and challenging herself to become the best version of herself. However, this growth came with a constant pressure. The hours of work, the responsibilities, and her old habits of not asking for help began to weigh on her mind. She feared that her pursuit of professional fulfillment might affect her relationship with Raphael. But instead of retreating, Lena decided it was time to open her heart and share these insecurities. One quiet evening, as they were having dinner together, she brought the conversation to the table. "Rafa, I'm afraid I won't be able to balance all of this work, our relationship, my insecurities. I feel like I'm unintentionally drifting away from you." Raphael, with the calm he always had, placed his hand over hers and looked into her eyes, saying, without hesitation, "You're not alone in this, Lena. We're in this together. I see your effort, and I understand the challenges you're facing. Nothing is more important than our happiness and mutual support. I'm here, and I will always be here, no matter what choices you need to make." Those words, spoken with such sincerity, ignited a flame within Lena. For the first time, she realized that she didn't have to carry the weight of her insecurities alone. Raphael wasn't just by her side as a partner, but as someone who truly cared for her and her inner struggles. He accepted her, with all her insecurities and fears, and more importantly, he was willing to face them together. It was in that moment that Lena realized that true love was not something passive or dependent on external circumstances. True love required presence, communication, and above all, daily choices. Every day with Raphael became a new opportunity to choose to give herself, to allow herself to be vulnerable, and to grow alongside him. It was a constant choice, but one that in making, she felt stronger and more whole. The new chapter that opened before them was much more than just a relationship. It was a partnership in every aspect of life. They were learning that, to build a future together, they needed to be willing to choose each other every day, even when life became difficult. The truth was that the difficulties wouldn't disappear, but the way they would face them, united, made their love even stronger. In that moment, Lena understood that with Raphael by her side, she didn't need to be perfect. She could make mistakes, she could get lost, but she would always have a safe harbor to return to. He loved her, not because she was immune to flaws, but because he believed in her, in their potential as a couple. Together, they were building something bigger than any obstacle, a deep connection, founded on trust, respect, and true love. This new chapter, far from being an escape from challenges, was the beginning of something extraordinary. Lena knew that love didn't mean a life without difficulties, but a shared journey in which, together, they could face anything. What mattered was the choice to move forward side by side, without fear of the future, and with the certainty that, despite the adversities, they were stronger and more united than ever. I'm glad you're enjoying this beautiful story. But before we continue, I noticed you haven't liked the video yet. It's really important for YouTube to keep recommending our content, so we can keep bringing more emotional stories like this one. So don't wait, hit that like button now and help our community grow. Thanks. Time passed, and like all relationships, Lena and Raphael's was marked by moments of tension. What seemed like an unbreakable connection faced a challenge that seemed to test the limits of their bond. A deep misunderstanding between the two led to a sudden coldness. Raphael, who had always been patient and understanding, now seemed distant, and Lena in turn felt lost in a sea of doubts and frustrations. Both found themselves trapped in a cycle of silent accusations and unresolved resentments. The pain was palpable, but what hurt the most was the feeling that something so precious was being consumed by something small and insignificant. They both knew it couldn't be the end, but what could they do to rebuild trust? How could they restore what they had lost? It was during one of those moments of solitude that Lena finally made a decision that would change everything. She needed to apologize. She knew that the fault wasn't just on one side, but she also knew that the first step toward healing the wound was in her hands. After long days of silence, she sat with Raphael on a park bench, the same place where they had exchanged laughter and passionate glances during calmer times. "Rafa, I need to tell you something important," she began, her voice trembling. "I made mistakes and I know I hurt you. I was impulsive, and I didn't realize how much it affected you. Please forgive me for not acting more carefully. I never meant to hurt you." Raphael, who had been silent, looked deeply into Lena's eyes. He could feel her pain and knew this moment was crucial. With a sigh, he responded, "I hurt you too, Lena. I also let things take a wrong turn, and I'm not perfect. But at no point did I think about giving up on us. I need time to process, but I love you." In that instant, something incredible happened. Lena felt a wave of relief and, at the same time, a renewed strength. The power of forgiveness, both in asking for it and offering it, was more liberating than she could have imagined. What seemed like an insurmountable obstacle became the bridge to an even deeper love. In the weeks that followed, Lena and Raphael worked together to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a magical solution. But, little by little, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together again. They learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but rather accepting each other's imperfections, with the certainty that they were willing to grow together, not despite the flaws, but because of them. Their love was not a story of perfection, but of overcoming and commitment. The storm that had seemed to separate them now united them in an even stronger way. They learned that for love to flourish, there had to be space for vulnerability, for forgiveness, and most importantly, for mutual acceptance. It wasn't about being perfect, but about being real, human, and above all, willing to start over, even when it seemed impossible. Lena and Raphael understood that true love is not just made of happy and peaceful moments, but also of confrontations, challenges, and moments of deep reflection. And it was in this process of reconciliation and forgiveness that they discovered the real meaning of being together, supporting each other, no matter what challenges life brought. And with that, their relationship emerged stronger, more solid, and more capable of facing any storm that might arise on the horizon. As the days went by, Lena and Raphael began to realize that it was no longer about finding the perfect path, but rather about building the road together, stone by stone. The reconciliation had brought not only forgiveness, but also the deep understanding that true love requires patience, effort, and above all, commitment. On a quiet evening, as they walked hand in hand along a street illuminated by the soft lights of the city, Lena stopped and looked at Raphael. "I didn't know what being together truly meant until now," she said. "Everything we've been through made me realize that what matters isn't the ups and downs, but our willingness to keep going, always, side by side." Raphael smiled, squeezing her hand tightly. "That's it. We don't need all the answers, but we have each other, and that's all that matters." I promise that I'll keep choosing you every single day. In every moment. The promise was simple and sincere, yet full of meaning. They both knew the future would be unpredictable, with new challenges arising, but together, they were ready for anything. From that moment on, their commitment was unbreakable, and nothing else seemed impossible. The promise made that night, under the soft city lights, was not just a simple declaration, but the starting point for a new chapter in Lena and Raphael's lives. Although the future remained uncertain and the fear of the unexpected was always present, something inside them had changed forever. The love they shared, now stronger, more mature, and rooted in trust and forgiveness, had the power to turn every obstacle into an opportunity. In the following months, their lives seemed to flow with more harmony. Deep conversations, spontaneous laughter, and quiet moments of complicity became constant. They were no longer just two individuals trying to adapt to each other. They had become true partners, understanding that love is not a journey without difficulties, but an adventure that is built, step by step, facing whatever comes their way. Lena felt more confident, both in her professional life and in her relationship. She was certain that she could rely on Raphael at all times, and that motivated her to challenge herself even more. Raphael, in turn, felt a deep satisfaction in seeing the woman he loved grow. And at the same time, he felt more fulfilled, knowing he was also a vital part of that growth. Their love had matured in a way neither of them had ever imagined. What had seemed like a romance, marked by uncertainty and challenges, had now transformed into a true partnership, where every choice was made with the commitment to building a life together. The scars of the past did not hold them back, but became reminders of how much they had overcome and how their connection was stronger than ever. Together, they discovered that love is much more than a fleeting emotion. It is a daily construction, a constant choice, a commitment to support, grow, and evolve side by side. And so what began with promises and challenges now flourished into a future full of possibilities, where each day brought a new reason to keep choosing each other. The love they shared, transformative and unbreakable, was, after all, what made everything possible. Over time, Lena and Raphael not only fulfilled their promises, but surpassed all the expectations they had about love and life together. The challenges they faced at the beginning of their relationship became mere chapters of a bigger story, a story of resilience and commitment. They were no longer just a couple, but a true partnership, where love was a daily choice and trust an unshakable foundation. Together, they created the life they had always dreamed of, and more importantly, they learned that the greatest gift was the simple fact of having each other, always at the end of each day. Their love had no end. It was eternal. What did you think of this story? Leave a comment and mention the part you liked the most. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming exciting videos. See you in the next story.